Hi friends, now let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of working with secondary data. So let's begin with the pros of working with secondary data. The secondary data is easily accessible compared to the primary data because when it comes to primary data, we need to have our own team, we need to have our own methodology to collect the data. We need to reach to various places at different times. So it's going to be a costly affair. We need to spend a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of time for collecting the primary data. But on the other side, the secondary data is already available because somebody else has already done this for us. So it's available. We just use it. That's the one issue. The second issue is when it comes to primary data, it is our team which is working. But when it comes to secondary data, there is no limit that we should use one data from one source. We can use data from multiple sources. So there are many platforms available that can be accessed by the researchers to get the data. That's one very important advantages of using secondary data. Then secondary data is very much affordable because we don't have to create our own team and work on it. So it will be a bit very much cost effective. It needs very little cost to acquire them because they are sometimes given out free also. Even if it is charged, it's not going to be heavily charged because the one who has collected this data has already made money out of it for using it. Now that data is being given to others. So whatever they are trying to make money out of it, it's just going to be an extra income. So it will not be as huge as having our own team and making it. And many times the data is made available freely because there are some organizations like government organizations who uh, invest their time, money, and all that for the collecting the data for the public use. So it will be made available freely. Other side, the data, whatever was intended to, has already done it. So now the data is redundant for them. So there is no harm in sharing with others. So whatever they wanted to extract from the data, they have already done it, and all the advantages they wanted to take from that, they have already taken it. So it's going to be a redundant thing for them, so they can share it freely, or they are sharing with many uh, agencies. Therefore, the cost gets divided into many shares, so the cost goes down multiple way, so it becomes very affordable. The time spent on the collecting the secondary data is very little compared to that of the primary data. So it's only we need to search where the data is available and to get the permission and get the data. That's it. But when it comes to primary data, we need to create our own team. We need to create our own strategy to collect the data and then work on uh, working with the making the data usable, make it clean, and all that activities are to be taken up by ourselves. So it's going to be highly time consuming if we wish to have our own primary data. But if it is secondary data, a very little time is required, just a matter of getting permission and transferring data from their institute to our institute. Secondary data makes it possible to carry out longitudinal studies without having to wait for a long time to draw conclusions. So the data is available, so we can make various teams to work on it parallelly. So we don't have to wait for one activity to complete before starting the second activity. We can make the things parallelly because the whole data is available at a time. So you can just select whichever part of the data you want. Then you can create multiple teams to work on various different activities parallelly. So it also helps in generating new insights into existing primary data. So if it is our past data, which was our primary data, and then we can understand better what all is missing looking at the others data. Then in future, whenever we are trying to create a primary data for our activities, yes, we can make use of what we learned by using the secondary data, that is the data collected by others. Others methods may be better than what we were using to create our own data, so we can make use of that. So we, with the time, we can evolve, uh, adopt the techniques, methods used by others, and improve our own data style, data structure, data quality, and all that. Yeah, nothing comes free. So when there are so many advantages, there has to be disadvantages, and there are some disadvantages for secondary data. The first of all thing is it is not authentic and reliable because it is not created by us. Somebody else has created, so we are not sure whether the somebody else who is giving us data is reliable, and also we are not sure that whatever data they are sharing with us is authentic. So they may be cooked up, and they may not be reliable. Yes, we have to accept this because if you want to save time, money, resources, and all, and get the data as early as possible through some other agency, yes, you have to be ready to face these problems. Yeah, there is authenticity and reliability problems. So we need to verify the data collected from the available sources before really using them. So that's a little difficulty we have. And we may have to deal with irrelevant data before finally finding the required data. Yes, we are working on one project. We need a type of data, and instead of we searching for the data ourselves, we are trying to depend on others. So that means somebody else has already done this similar activity and they have collected the data and we want to make use of it. But it's not necessary that whatever problem we are trying to solve, exactly the same problem the other team also might have solved. So they might have solved a similar type of problem. Therefore, the data they have collected to solve their problem may not exactly fit to our problem. So some of the data may be useful to us. Now it becomes a big tragedy when it comes to using the secondary data. We get a lot of irrelevant data, and we need to verify whether any given data is useful or not before actually using it. So we need to filter it in a very strict way so that we make use of this secondary data to our full satisfaction. And that's one another problem we do face when we try to avoid creating our own team and having our own primary data. Then some of the data may be exaggerated due to their personal bias. So when we are trying to work on our problem, we do know how the bias is going to affect our results and all that. But when it is outsider, external sources are there, so they may have their own bias, and those bias are definitely going to affect our performance of our activity. And so we need to be very careful in selecting the data and make sure that there is no personal bias in the data source. So that's in fact a difficult issue to make out, but yes, it has to be done. Secondary data sources are sometimes outdated because there is no data available that's up to date to replace the new ones. Now you're talking about current generation problems. So the problem with the current generations, like talking about latest mobiles and all that, yes, if you are talking of this type of problem and you have data of the people who were using the old telephone sets, of course, that data is totally useless to us because the data talks about a mobile telephone set, but we are, as today we are talking about the latest generation mobile phones and all other applications which are available on that. So all the services which are provided by the mobile phone. So we need to work on that. We are trying to study the effects of various uh, facilities provided by the latest mobile phones. But the data you have is old phones where there is no such facility, then it actually has no meaning. Though it is available freely, it doesn't mean that you can take up anything and even if it is useless, just keep on dumping onto your memory. Yeah, yeah. Today memory is also cheap. Doesn't mean that just fill all the garbage. Of course, the famous statement says garbage in, garbage out. So if you keep feeding garbage, the results also will be garbage. So make sure that the data is up to date. So that has to be taken care. So that's various sources of the secondary data. So that can be collected. The internally you can collect. So the internal data will be obtained with less time, effort, and money. That is already done in our organization. That's the internal data. And that's more pertinent to the situation at hand because it is generated by our own team, but for the previous problem. So like profit loss statements, balance sheets, sales figures, and all are available. You can make use of them. External outside companies, the large environment we have, more difficult to collect, much greater variety, sources are much more numerous, universities, government sources, foundations, and all such things are available for us externally to supply us the secondary data. Now the question is how to tell if the source is primary or secondary. Just to determine if something can be used as a primary or secondary source, there are simple questions you need to ask yourself. Does this source come from anyone directly involved in the events I am studying? Then it is primary. Or is another one doing it? Then it is secondary. Am I interested in analyzing the source itself? Then it becomes primary. I am only using it for background information, then it becomes secondary. Does the source provide original information? If yes, then it is primary. Or does it comment upon information from other sources? Then it is secondary. So which one is better? The most research uses both primary, secondary sources. Yes, because in the previous sessions we have seen that the primary sources or the primary data has both positive negative sides. Secondary also has both positive negative sides. Therefore, we cannot just outrightly say that use only first primary or use only secondary, because both have their own positive negative parts of it. So we need to make a balance between primary and secondary sources. So look at from the primary side and then look at from the secondary side. So what all information you wanted, try to collect it from the secondary. What all is possible, collect it. And whatever you could not collect from the other sources, then go for creating your own data. That's look for primary source of data. So primary sources are the foundation of original research. So that will be used for making new discoveries, provide credible evidence for your arguments, give authoritative information about your topic. And if you don't use any primary sources, your research will not be considered as original or reliable. So nobody uh, takes it serious. They just reject it because there is no primary source. You just can't keep on telling that because somebody else said, you can't just claim something because that's already claimed by them. So yes, just secondary sources are not sufficient. You should have your own primary sources to justify your results. Then why do you require secondary sources? Secondary sources are good for gaining a full overview of your topic. So that's looking at the background and all that. Yes, definitely in such cases, secondary sources are very much useful because you just can't create your own data without knowing anything about the field where you are working in. So best thing would be you begin your activities looking at secondary sources, try to understand the whole picture, and then start creating your own primary data. So the secondary sources allow us to gain the background information on the topic, support or contrast your arguments for the researcher's ideas, gather information from primary sources that you can't access directly, and so on. So when it comes to proving anything, so if you have any hypothesis, be it your own research in creating something new product, or it may be an academic research or whatever it is, yes, you are trying to prove some hypothesis. So you are having your own hypothesis. You want to just justify that that is right. So in doing that, one side you have your own results. On the other side, you have others' results, and then show that others' results have some flaws, some gaps, and prove that your results are going to fill that gap. So that's easiest way of continuing with the research. Or if you are creating anything new, yeah, just look at what is available in the market today, and then look at what is missing. Anything new feature you want to add to the products, then so what all features are available, yes, you will get from the secondary sources, and what new you want to add, yes, that you have to generate on your own. So that's your primary information. So make sure to create your own primary information such that it fills the gaps in the secondary information, and that way you can prove that yours is going to fulfill the old unfulfilled dreams and all that. So that way you can work on it. So that's primary, secondary sources, their pros and cons and all that, where it can be used, where primary to be used, where secondary to be used, when primary is required, when secondary is required. All these details we just looked at in detail. Hope to see you in the coming sessions for further discussion.